It's your boy Lotus. Much love, many blessings. Okay, so this time we're doing 1134 segment. So this is hell yes. So this is talking about being dangerous, activating our power, and how are we actually taking our force and actually doing something tangible with it. This particular theme today, I've been actually reading in my Osho books. Like, well, Osho has a lot of books, but I'm a big fan of Osho. And this particular one is Sex Matters, Osho. So this one is more so about just the themes of, I mean, obviously sacred sexuality, but just transcendent sex, cosmic sex, and there's a lot of other like liberations. I don't really want to go into it too deep, but one of the things that I was picking up on as I was picking up the book, because I'm not reading it from beginning to end. Sometimes when I feel called to do segments, sometimes I'll do a little bit of bibliomancy, which is it's kind of like cardology, except it's really when you think about everything at its base, when you take energy, when you touch things or just interact with things, all that does is just change our interaction and what we feel from those objects and those the things that those objects are coming in contact with. So sometimes when we're concentrating and we're in tune with our body, bibliomancy is just a form of, okay, what is my body trying to connect with or tell me about a situation? So I decided to do a little bit of bibliomancy for some of the themes this week, for the 1134 segment, with Leo season being in this kind of like playing on the theme of like the inner child. I thought that, you know, it really brought my awareness to a particular passage that I was reading. It was just talking about how we like operate as children, how we operate when we grow up, and how like we have the state of being in like paradise and when we're children, and then like just things, you know, like we become the villain as we get older. I think that that's very interesting because it really shows that like all of us intrinsically deal with this state. We can all, even no matter what our walk of life is, gender, whatever the fuck, we all have instances where we can compare our lives to when we were younger or our childhood, and there was this state of bliss, this state of like heaven, or just things were better than they are now. Like as you get older, you have these responsibilities, and depending on how your path moves, you start to become more jaded with life and things of that nature. So it really got me to thinking like, okay, so collectively, what is that? We all come into this world, we all have this kind of like this, you know, if we take on the notion that heaven is like a state of being, and obviously hell is a state of being too, then regardless of argument, that state that we're in, this blissful state, this heavenly state, this paradise state, we all seem to have access to it when we're children, and it starts to gradually diminish, almost like a reverse snowball effect or a negative snowball effect as we get older. And what is this? Why are we on this path of suffering? Why are we on this path of, why is our path go from a state of paradise to suffering? Why is our path of life not going from suffering to paradise? Like, what's going on? Because I mean, obviously if it can go one direction, it can go the other, because if it didn't, then we would have to literally conclude that becoming an adult or getting older means that suffering is the byproduct, that those two are directly correlated, and it's not. So I think it has to be something deeper. But what I do notice is that all of us, even if we didn't have the best childhood, what we can generally say is our childhood, things were easier. We had more imagination. We had more, we had less inhibitions. You know, we had less inhibitions. We had more freedom to embrace joy, embrace our liberations than we feel that we do when we get older. And like what is that state? Because I will say that one of the deeper things about just focusing on that aspect, like just as a child and being in this bliss state, since happiness isn't something that's being taught, like if we think of children, babies, and pets, and the reason I say animals and babies is because they intrinsically have a similar, I guess, drive, as far as you don't have to teach them this, it's just naturally ingrained in them. So if children and babies and animals, without having to teach them, naturally know joy, naturally know imagination, naturally know how to just be in paradise, then that means it's not something that's learned. That means it's something that is just its source. And that's a lot going on. But its source. So if it's source, that means that by nature, kind of piggybacking something else into that similar category, that health or being healthy is source. So when we get sick, sickness is the absence of health. Health isn't the absence of sickness. So that means that health is natural. Health is what happens when we're just existing. So sickness is the absence of health, or an area where something has gotten in. Sickness is always external, because health in its resting state comes from within. That means within, or positive, or joy, or heaven. All these frequencies are, all these things are the same frequency. That means all these things come from within. So sadness and sorrow and toxins and poison come when you put something in, and it takes away from the happiness. It takes away from the heaven state. So we're brought down. So that means that when we're in our youth, let's say we have aspirations, like even just taking like myself, like I think about how now when I look back at myself as a child, like I remember when I know I had to been like fucking 3 or 4. I was really, really young, because it was peculiar for the age that I was, what I was doing. And I remember like my dad and his girl was throwing like a party, or like a party or whatever. I don't know, it might have been like a block party, whatever the fuck. I was 3, so I don't really know the details. But I do remember it was late. And I remember that they were all the time throwing a party, drinking, whatever the fuck, right? So, I was a very, intrepid baby or whatever the fuck at the time. And it was just funny, because when I think back to that, like I remember literally getting downstairs to the 2-family flat, because a lot of Detroit houses, like everybody was living in fucking two-family flats in the 80s. Getting downstairs in a 2-family flat, managing to get out the door, and like going or crawling or whatever the fuck over to like the neighbor's house. And obviously I was eventually picked up, because I'm here, but I remember that feeling at the time, and I remember the exhilaration, and even for my baby state of mind, like just the thrill, the exhilaration, or the euphoria of getting out, and that rush of wanting to be out and explore, and to want to travel, wanting to expand, to see more than what it is that I normally know or have access to. And as a baby and as a youth, that shit really excited me, to the point that I was even willing to like do something radical, like run away, or just to see what the fuck was going on. And then I noticed as I get older, when I take myself now, I'm really more so just getting back to, I have the same independence, I have the same ability to go wherever I want in the world, is my canvas, so to speak. But because of the traumas, the betrayals, the loss, the relationships, the disappointments, the PTSDs from scars, both physical and non-physical, mental scars, emotional scars, things of that nature, burdens that I've carried, having to put things off, I have the same freedom, but now I have this fear of like, okay, well, what the fuck's gonna happen with this unknown? And it's like, when I was a baby, it was like, okay, well, the unknown didn't scare me, and the world is, for all intents and purposes, pretty much the same state. So what has changed? Have I changed? Is the perception changed? Is the paradise still available to me, or is everything in a hell state now? Or is my naivety the only thing that allowed me to be in heaven? I don't think it comes down to that, because everything seems to be really just a perception. Because when I look at myself and I actually ask myself what I'm afraid of and what's the same and what's different about that then and now, the feeling of excitement that comes from when I know that I'm about to step out into the world and not be in a prison, not be in a cubicle, not be controlled by somebody, is still the same as it was when I was a kid. But sometimes when I'm actually moving towards the things that I actually want, that come with the freedom, in this present moment, my PTSDs and scars and things of that nature make me pause or caution for something that may not even actually be there. And it has me thinking like, okay, well, so is something being deposited into my passion for purpose? Because my passion for purpose when I was a child was pure, and at its worst, just lacked knowledge. But now my passion for purpose has knowledge, but I have so much knowledge that I'm not moving. I'm paralyzed. So is this what happens when you eat from the tree of knowledge? You become so crippled with what you know that you can't do anything. So it kind of makes you ask, like, okay, well, what am I doing with this power? What am I doing with this energy? And if that feeling, if the constant between my inner child or what I was doing when I was a child and the freedom and liberation that came to me and that excitement that raised in my spirit when I feel like stepping out and not being confined is the same constant frequency in my 30s, in my late 30s, that I feel when I think about that same feeling of freedom, then when I pause and that fear cycle that I feel, is that fear justified? Is that fear coming from somewhere external? It's not coming from within, but I'm still feeling it. But because I allowed it in, because I'm so used to it, because of all the other times when I've, blocked myself, or something happened where when I went towards what it was I want and I was cut short, short-sighted, didn't consider an option, somebody got the better hand on me, then those things played into it. And I took those things as justification that when I wanted more, or when I wanted to pursue my passion for purpose, when I wanted to not play it safe, that this was the consequence, that this was the punishment for doing those things. I think one of the big things that, like, when I think about this situation and like overall, like when we really ask the question, it's like, what is causing us to not be in this heaven state or this paradise state? Is there really a way to switch the role so that we're instead going from a state of our journey, or our soul purpose journey is going from a purpose of, or not a purpose, our passion for purpose and the path that we take is not one that is leading down paradise to suffering, but leading from suffering to a state of paradise. How do we reverse the process? What is it that we're doing that is not allowing us to turn it around to get to heaven? I think when we're, especially thinking on the fact that when we're trying to be spiritually rich in a recession, we have to look at what we're focused on as far as lack. Like, when things aren't going our way, like as a child, there were many things that we didn't have. We didn't have the money, we didn't have the means, and we were supported in many ways by somebody else who had to take care of a lot of things that were outside of our scope of understanding or perspective, or even means to even manipulate so that we could be safe. And in much the same way now, the same way our mothers and our fathers protected us from the gaps of our wisdom that would have left us vulnerable to the world, are we still operating in such a way that now that we know those things, that it's debilitating us and it's crippling us? So how can we operate with a knowing that doesn't keep us gripped in fear? What is it that we're not coming to terms with that is really locking us in place? I feel that, honestly, a lot of our power comes from finding those constants and rediscovering ourselves and finding those things that are still the same over time, and realizing what's actually not here now. A lot of times when we don't take that breath or that pause to take a breath so that we can clear our vessel or our energetic field, we don't realize that we're still operating in a space that is not currently going on. The heart chakra has a lot to do with it. The heart chakra is associated with air, the element of air, so it has a lot to do with movement. That's why when we advance ourselves, we open up to compassion, we activate, we break the I think it's the Ganti knot, the energetic knot that keeps us from ascending in our Kundalini energy in the heart chakra. Some of you have gifts that the more you open up your compassion, you notice that people with big heart chakras live long lives. The lungs associated with the heart. So the heart is also a space where when we don't take deep breaths on a psychic breath level, we don't create movement, or we don't create impact. The deeper part of the heart is impact, because it's not physical touch, but the gift of the heart is impact. It's felt. And that's why when people are authentic, because authenticity comes from the heart, when you are authentic and you give out authenticity, people can't forget you, even when they try to ignore you behind their clout, behind their money, behind their saying that they're, married or in a relationship, but they want to downplay the connection and things of that nature. The heart is where long life exists. The heart is where you start to get into those, like, them biblical, and people be living them like biblical long lives, like living like 130, 230, shit like that. You want to live a long life, you get into the heart. So I say that to say that there's a big association with the heart and the dimension of the heart chakra and how we maintain our paradise, but also how we maintain movement. Sometimes when we suffer traumas, PTSDs, and betrayals, it deposits in our heart and we stop breathing. And when we don't take deep breaths, we don't create big movement. Like, we stop breathing because when we breathe, we feel. When we breathe, it opens up our senses. So when we breathe, we also are more present. So the unfortunate thing is sometimes when we're suffering from pains, both physical and non-physical, we start to hold our breath, or we start to get short breath. We start to hyperventilate when we're panicking or have anxiety, or we start to hold our breath when we want to get through the pain and just get through this moment. And we've become so conditioned to that we don't properly breathe at all in any situation anymore. And we go through life shallowly breathing, shallowly existing, shallowly surface level feeling, surface level interpreting, surface level taking in information and energy. And we get used to that because we get tired of feeling the sensation of pain. So we also tell ourselves that when I breathe or when I'm alive, I also feel more of the things that I don't want to feel. And when I was younger, I was blocked from those things, but now I haven't had a means, or I haven't been aware or to develop the means to actually combat these things. So my best answer to the situation is to not breathe, to not feel, is to cut it off, is to numb it out. And I think that once we do that, we stop feeling, we stop imagining, we stop letting this energy come to life. So we stay stuck in the same situations, because when you're not breathing, your air is not moving, your energetic air is not moving. So you're still, your consciousness is not moving from the situation. Your consciousness is still sitting in that heartbreak. You might have already ended the relationship 3 years ago, but you're still revisiting that feeling because you aren't breathing. You aren't moving on. You aren't letting the energy rise and move on and create movement and something tangible and real for you. I believe that a lot of times when we become adults, we lose a lot of the key gifts that we're not taught. We just do them. Like, no one tells you how to really eat. No one tells you how to pump your heart. These things just happen. So we also just do things in our survival state to adjust to the situations. And when we start to be hurt, damaged, lied to, and create an overall mistrust of the world or a corrupted view of the world because of things that have happened to us, we start